Wall Street stocks edged higher with three major benchmarks trading firmly in the green as softer than expected inflation data and lower crude prices boost investor sentiment. US producer, in fact, price index came in unchanged in July, supporting expectations that Federal Reserve may hold rates steady.
Nifty fails to hold on to the crucial 24,400 mark as intensified selling in banking stocks drags the index into its third straight session of losses. Broader markets, however, buck the bearish trend to end higher.
Tata Trust accepts N. Chandrasekharan's decision to not extend his term as Tata Sons chairman beyond February next year. The trust sets up a selection committee to recommend his successor and ensure a smooth transition.
Tata Motors Passenger Vehicles reports a big miss in profits for the first quarter of FY27, even as revenues and EBITDA remain broadly in line with expectations. Meanwhile, in some positive signs, JLR's EBITDA margin beats estimates, coming in at 8.1% versus an ET Now poll of 5.4%.
Government sources say India and US remain committed to trade deal announced in February this year, even as contours of the final deal are yet to be ironed out. Meanwhile, trade deficit for July widens to $31.98 billion, up nearly 15% compared to last year.
The monsoon session of Indian Parliament draws to a close with a dismal productivity index. Just 12 bills were passed as the session was repeatedly disrupted, with political deadlocks deepening over student protests last month.
Air India begins mandatory screening for psychoactive substance for all the pilots after the pilot in command of the August 4 Phuket-Delhi flight tested positive for marijuana. Meanwhile, Civil Aviation Ministry is also considering increasing random drug tests for aviation personnel. The proposed changes could include suspension of licenses, criminal action cases of violation.
Hello and a warm welcome. You're watching India Tonight with me, Jude Sanith, and my colleague Shibani Garat joining us from our studios in Mumbai. It's the end of the monsoon session of Parliament, which concluded today. In total, 12 bills were passed in this session, but only one bill actually got passed after a debate. In fact, continuous disruptions and chaos in the Indian Parliament led to 11 bills being passed without even a semblance of a proper debate. In fact, the sloganeering and protests that pretty much made their appearance at Parliament session this year led to just 19% productivity in the Lok Sabha and a dismal 39% productivity in the Rajya Sabha. So Shibani, it seems like our netas make their way to the lower house and the upper house of the Parliament, intend to debate and pass legislation, but very little actually occurs given the political din that surrounds us and has been the case for the last month or so.
Absolutely, Jude. Now, approximately 92 hours, in fact, were lost in Lok Sabha and over 69 hours were lost in Rajya Sabha. Key bills like the FCRA were pushed to the Joint Parliamentary Committee. Bills like Women's Reservation Bill and delimitation that were expected to be brought back did not see the light of the day. The absence of debate is nothing but a loss to the taxpaying citizen of India who expects the lawmakers to take their grievances and present it in the temple of democracy. And we discuss this tonight with our panel of guests. First, we have Lakshmi Ashwin Gowda. She is a BJP spokesperson. Then we have Nikhil Jain. He's a political commentator. And we have Aditi Fadnis. She is a senior journalist. Thank you so much for joining us today on ET Now. Let's go over to you, Mr. Jain. Now, if you look at it, 175 crore with near zero output. Now, if we were and if this was corporate, and if corporates delivered this kind of zero output, the board members would be fired. Why should a taxpayer tolerate this?
I'm not so sure if right now we're going to be wanting the resignation of the Lok Sabha Speaker and the Prime Minister as well. Well, that was on a lighter note. That being said, see, Shivani, this entire idea of a productivity index for the Parliament or for any state assembly, I feel it's quite flawed. We all need to understand that Parliament has multiple functions. Legislative business is one of its purposes. Passing bills, passing amendments, appealing bills, and changing laws is one of its purposes. The key and the most important purpose of a Parliament, especially in a Westminster system of democracy, is to hold the government to account. And oppositions across the world, including in India, including before 2014, employed all sorts of tactics to make sure that the government is held accountable, as is their job. To look at the functioning and productivity of the parliament only on the basis of the number of bills passed and the number of minutes of discussion on a particular legislative draft that was put before the government is like trying to value the Facebook stock on the basis of the physical assets it owns. Facebook's value doesn't lie in the land or the building that it owns. It lies in the data that it owns. It lies in the intangible brand value of the Facebook asset that Facebook, Instagram, and the other assets the company called Meta owns. Likewise, in the parliament, the key value of the parliament is that my member of parliament raises my voice. The opposition of the country raises the voice, the counter view in the country, other than the view of the government. And that is what we saw beautifully happening this time around in the parliament. The opposition put the government to dock. For the first time in 12 years, a minister was made to resign because of incompetence, something that has happened for the first time. MJ Akbar's resignation is a slightly different case. And also, we saw the FCRA bill being sent to the JPC, where again the opposition has managed to, put its view forward to the government and made the government want to reconsider what it has done. I don't think this was a flawed session of the parliament. I think this was a fabulous session of the parliament. Of course, it's a win for the opposition and not for the government that for the longest of time, Amit Shah did not appear in the parliament, did not answer questions that were being posed by the opposition on behalf of the people. So let's not see it as 92 hours lost and 69 hours lost. Let's see it as 92 hours of protest, 69 hours of protest, and protest is the founding building block of any democracy.
Nikhil, you couldn't have put it any better, because the fact is that if the parliament is truly the heart and soul of our democracy, surely it's where the angst that the country feels must perhaps be most expressed. And in fact, Aditi, if I could come over to you next. The fact is, it isn't exactly, unusual for parliament to have such abysmal productivity numbers. I mean, if productivity is an index we're going by for whatever it's worth. In fact, I'm looking at the numbers here. While the 2026 monsoon session in the Lok Sabha saw about 19% productivity, the 2021 monsoon session saw about 21%. The 2015 monsoon session in the Rajya Sabha actually saw 9% productivity. So we have had years where there's been a very similar index of dismal productivity as far as the parliament is concerned. But surely, like Nikhil was mentioning, it's led to some very tangible gains. The amendment to the examination legislation, of course, was tabled and passed. So, as is the case with the FCRA, sent to a joint parliamentary committee. These were major issues. These were issues that perhaps required a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, a lot of push and pressure as well, given how possibly polarizing they would eventually turn out to be. So, all in all, despite the numbers, you'd say a pretty decent parliament in terms of the heart and soul of democracy being felt and expressed, Aditi.
It's disappointing that the government thinks that because 12 bills were passed with an average of 15 minutes of discussion, apart from the exam bill, is a big feather in its cap. It's disappointing to see that. But having said that, I completely agree with Mr. Jain that it's much more, Parliament is much more than just a talking shop where everyone has the right to express their opinion and expresses it, notwithstanding the time frame and the amount of time they are given and so on and so forth. It's much more than that. But having said that, the onus of running parliament is largely with the government. It is armed with a huge ministry to do precisely that, to run parliament. And if it does not run through parliamentary means, if the government is afraid that it will be shouted down, then it has to do negotiation. It has to go behind the scenes, hold out a hand to the opposition and create conditions where parliament can work. It is the job of the opposition to raise issues which are in opposition to the government, and it is the government's job to push forward an agenda that it feels should be followed. So I am not. I mean, it's the lack of discussion is a problem, but as you yourself said, the
Absolutely,
Joint Parliamentary
absolutely.
Committee.
Absolutely, point taken. Let's take this question also to Lakshmi Ashwin Gowda. She is a BJP spokesperson. Now, you have repeatedly blamed opposition for running away from debates. But, you know, if you truly wanted a discussion and a debate, then why did your floor managers rush through 11 out of the 12 bills without any discussion?
Thanks for having me here, Shivani. The recently concluded parliamentary monsoon session has witnessed two contrasting pictures. On the one hand, our government was completely dedicated. It has shown its resilience. It has shown its commitment to run the business through the parliamentary delivery, the legislative delivery. On the other hand, the opposition has totally resorted to derailment, disruption, and all sort of drama just to grab the headline. That's it. Parliamentary 7,000, despite in the midst of 7,000 minutes of wastage of the parliamentary time, we could able to pass 12 bills unhindered. That shows our executive resilience, that shows our executive efficiency. Parliament run based on the discussion. Our democracy works based on the debate, discussion, and dissent, not on the derailment, drama, or the dysfunctioning or the disruption. The Congress government has, the Congress party has completely resorted to disruption because it didn't want to get the answer, because it didn't want to get exposed in front of the people. It didn't want to get expose its political vendetta or political narrative or the propaganda, whatever it is. The functioning of the democracy depends solely on the discussion and the debate, not on the derailment as done by the Congress party. On the other hand, the responsibility for the mere 19% of the Lok Sabha productivity or 67% of the Rajya Sabha productivity has completely depended on the Congress party being run away from the structural debate. Our legislature branch, our treasury bench has always invited for the discussion, but they constantly run away because they have a constant chronic phobia about the discussion. They are two-faced. The Congress party is so much hypocritic that when Congress run in all the Congress ruled states and the past UPA regime has always stonewalled the discussions. It is we,
Ma'am,
BJP
but all,
government,
all
and
that
it is our
happened this
NDA
time was
dispensation.
discussion on some key bills. That is what we are saying, that there was a discussion on some of the key bills,
that's
but
what
there were
our
11.
Parliamentary Affairs Minister and our Home Minister and other ministers has invited them for the discussion. They constantly run away from the discussions. They come with the placards, they charged into the wells, and they raised the sloganeering. They didn't want to get exposed. They didn't want to get the answers. They just want to disrupt, to grab the headline. That's it. They wasted the taxpayers' money. They wasted the parliamentary hours that was otherwise dedicated for the smooth functioning of the democracy.
Lakshmi Gowda, the fact is that while you say that the opposition has largely been running away or has been disrupting the House, I don't know if my memory serves me right, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for the longest time, if you recall, the opposition members were demanding the presence of the Home Minister while the protests were on at Jantar Mantar to make himself available at Parliament. So surely accountability was called for, even by way of physical presence by members of the opposition. So isn't it ironic that you talk about opposition members not turning up, running away, and causing disruptions to the House?
See, we were ready to give them the answer. We believe in democracy. We believe in legislative hours. We believe in the legislative delivery. And we have invited them to give them the answers. It is the responsibility of them to come and listen to us. It is responsibility of them to give the nation. It's a debate for the sake of the nation. We actually dedicate our parliamentary proceedings for the sake of the nation. They ran away. They shied away from their responsibility. It is really shame on them. They really didn't want to get any sort of answers because they would only get exposed. If they really try to get the real answers, the actual reason behind it, we were ready to give them the answers. All of us were ready. Our ministers were ready. Our home minister has called them openly to come inside the parliament and to discuss. They
Right.
resorted to all
Let's
sort
go
of
over to Nikhil.
disruption,
Nikhil Jain.
derailment.
He wants to add a point over here. And Nikhil, while we are at it, help us understand. I have a question for you also at the same time. Should we stick to fixed parliamentary schedules, much like what UK and US have, to also avoid the wastage of taxpayers' money? Also answer that for us, but make your point right now.
Shubhani, I genuinely feel we need to have stricter schedules, stricter accountability in the parliament, and I'm saying that for the government as well as for the opposition members. The kind of cavalier manner we've been treating the parliament in the past 10 to 12 years, and perhaps also the past several decades, I don't think that is the sign of a healthy democracy. I think we need to hold our members of parliament more to account that why are you not going to parliament? Why is your attendance below a 50%? Why is there no 0 hour where the prime minister has to answer? How is it that a very important bill can be introduced by the MOS and not by the cabinet minister? I think these change in rules does need to happen, and I think the government and opposition should ideally work together on that. But again, that's a very utopian dream to have. That being said, I do agree with my friend from the BJP on one point that the government showed exemplary executive efficiency. Indeed, they did. They are a government which is able to pass a bill that would affect the entire country in less than a minute. I don't think any country has that level of efficiency and quickness. The problem is it efficacious? You are very efficient. You can do something in 10 seconds, which other people take 10 hours to do. But what you're doing, is that right? Is that good? Is that enough? Because Parliament, like we've discussed, even for the legislative business, is a forum for discussion, is a forum for disagreement, is a forum to bring in amendment. But if you all that you want to do is pass bills without any discussion, without taking into account whatever suggestions the opposition and other non-ruling party members of the parliament have for you, then what really is the point of even having a parliament? Because everybody knows that the government does have the numbers. The government can pass any bill whenever it wants. Then what is the point of having all these seats, speaker systems, a speaker, this, that? Let's all just sign on a piece of paper. Let the ruling party members sign on a piece of paper, and any legislative business would be passed. But that's not what the purpose of a parliament is. And also, she says that the UPA and the Congress in the past have not, shown a penchant for discussing in the parliament. That's very wrong. They had fabulous discussions, and might I remind my friend from the BJP of the discussions that Atal ji, Sushma ji, Jaitley ji did in the parliament. Fabulous speeches by members of the opposition back then, which were very well allowed by the government back then, the speaker back then, and were responded to. Lastly, she says that it's the responsibility of the opposition to come and listen to the government. I'm sorry, it is not the responsibility of the opposition to only listen to the government. It is the responsibility of the opposition to question the government. The responsibility of the government is to answer the questions. But for an 18-day session, the Home Minister cannot not show up in the Parliament for the first 17 days when there are such pressing questions on his role and involvement, either incompetence or deliberate complicity in the police brutality that happened on the students on the very first day of the Parliament. Where is the responsibility for the government? Is all the responsibility in this country only for opposition members? Is my problem. That's the narrative that the BJP wants around here.
I definitely want to go over to Aditi Fadnis next, but what I will do is I will give Lakshmi Gowda a chance to respond to Nikhil. Lakshmi, I think the most standout part of what you said was executive resilience, and I think even Nikhil harped on that for a little bit. Should parliamentary be the venue for executive resilience in the first place? Surely the cabinet is the hallmark and the home ground of the Indian executive, but the parliament ought to be the home of democratic resilience. And if democracy lies in debate and spirited opposition, so be it. Surely it's not the place for executive resilience to be tom-tommed about as if it is perhaps the most striking feature of your parliament, which needs to be written home about. If you could just respond to the points that Nikhil was making over there, Lakshmi, before I go on to Aditi.
As I already told that, our democracy thrives on debate. Our democracy thrives on discussion. Our democracy thrives on debate and deliberations, discussions, not on the disruption, derailment, or the running away or creating a political drama. Our political culture has been totally vitiated by the coalition compulsions. coalition compulsions, and the myopic vision of the political party, they could not rise above the party politics and do the national development. Why would they even resort to the party politics, disruptive politics? Why do they even vitiate the political culture of the greatest country like India, the vibrant democracy like India? They are the blot and the blemish.
Let's go over to Aditi Fadnis over here and help us understand who takes the primary blame for this kind of specific institutional failure, because obviously there is going to be a blame game. Opposition is disruptive is what our fellow panelist was saying, but there is no healthy parliamentary session without a debate. So who takes the blame for this kind of productivity during a parliamentary session?
Well, apparently nobody takes the blame. I mean, they're all gloating over the fact that the parliament has done, past 12 bills, and despite disruption, the opposition is saying we have held the government to account. Because of us, one minister resigned. So, I mean, in this situation, both are winners if that such a thing is possible. Uh, but that said, it is very distressing that the government is happy that 12 bills have been passed with so little discussion, and the opposition is happy that they made a minister resign. The ultimate losers, I think, are you and me, because the institution has not done what it is supposed to do, which is to gain institutional experience, to address issues using the collective might of the brains and the experience of the House as legislators, and just make India a better place to live.
I have to go back to Lakshmi. Lakshmi, I believe you wanted to add something to what you were saying a little earlier before we briefly lost you for a bit. Please go ahead, Lakshmi.
The opposition parties, the myopic vision opposition parties has only deceived the people of this country by constantly disrupting the questionnaire and the 0 hour that was meant for the discussions of the public issues. That was of the public importance. They have not just deceived themselves, they also deceived the people of this country. And they've deceived them, and they've caused utter disregard to the democracy of this country, vibrant functioning of the democracy of this country. It's shame on them. That's the only thing I would like to say about them.
Right, Nikhil, you wanted to make a point.
Shivani, I also believe that the opposition should not have disrupted the parliament in the 0 hour. They should have allowed questions to be asked. But my question remains simple. When the home minister of the country treats parliament in such a cavalier manner that for pretty much the entirety of the session, he chooses to not come, when the prime minister chooses to bunk the parliament for most of the session, is that all right? What do you expect the opposition to do? Do you expect the opposition to just say, okay, sir, yes, sir, sorry, sir, prime minister, sir, home minister, sir, you will not attend the parliament, but we'll sit down here with a finger on our lips and we'll not disrupt the question hour, 0 hour? Is that how you want the opposition of the country to function? Or do you want them to be strong? Do you want them to be
At this
aggressive?
point, I would like to ask Ma'am Aditi Fadnis over here, help us understand, should there be no work, no pay, which all of us corporate employees have this policy right here. Shall we have this in the parliament for, as a penalty for causing unnecessary disruptions which are not valid, and the no-show inside the parliament, should that be there? Should the ministers be held accountable for not being present when critical bills are discussed? No work, no show, no pay.
So, as we say in journalism, there are about 5 stories trying to get out of the issues that you've just flagged. First of all, the Home Minister's presence was desired as a way of clarifying the situation, and he opted not to appear in Parliament, barring certain conditions that he laid down. I'm afraid it's not up to him to decide in what conditions he can appear in Parliament, in what conditions he should be present, and in what conditions he should not be present. This is a matter that is not dependent on him. Secondly, I don't think it's a good idea at all to have a docking of pay. If you reach your office, 10 minutes late, a certain percentage of your salary is docked. I don't think that's the way Parliament functions, and I don't think it's a good idea at all. Thirdly, uh, yes, there are people who are present in Parliament who have never spoken in their entire tenure. Some I could cite names, but I would rather not. There are people who have only shouted in Parliament and have done little else apart from disruption. So it's not that you are present and you are adding something to what is going on the floor of the House. It's much more than that, and I don't think these kind of restrictions will make the working of Parliament more efficient. I think everyone is doing what they're supposed to do, and it's both up to the opposition and the government to figure out the best way in which they are representing their constituency, whatever it might be.
Right. Lakshmi, coming over to you next. Now, while what you say about the opposition playing disruptor to Parliament is no doubt a point to be considered and debated over for sure, but I sometimes wonder if the government is perhaps giving room for that in the first place. I'm looking at some numbers even as we speak. In the UPA 1 and UPA 2 eras, nearly 60% of bills discussed were actually referred to committees. And in the UPA 2 era, a whopping 71% of all legislation that was discussed was actually passed on to a joint parliamentary committee for further study before it was actually going to be made into policy and law that governs the country. I'm looking at the numbers for both NDA 1, NDA 2, a dismal 25%, 16%. So I sometimes wonder, is the disruption, is the debate, is the raising of voice largely because the NDA governments have largely been a law or a force unto themselves? The non-partisan nature of the way they go about conducting themselves, passing the bills, looking at legislation. The FCRA itself, after great struggle, it was actually moved to a JPC. The government was unwilling to budge for the longest time. So I sometimes wonder, is the government bringing this upon itself in terms of giving the opposition more room to raise its voice by simply being very perhaps partisan when there's ample potential for non-partisan, more inclusive and more committee-driven approach before passing laws? Lakshmi.
We, the people of India, are very much aware of the fiasco of both UPA 1 and UPA 2 regimes. But going by your lines, if at all, if UPA 1 and UPA 2 regimes has given certain percentage of bills to the Joint Parliamentary Committee, that was because of the responsible opposition we were then. That was because of we believed in the democratic values of this country. That was because we were available in the parliament and the floor of the House to allow the smooth proceedings of the legislative proceedings. That was because we were the responsible and the most accountable opposition then. Coming to the point, under the able leadership of our central government, we are the fourth largest economy now. From the fragile 5 to we are the fourth largest economy now, because that shows our efficiency, executive efficiency. And we are following the robust foreign policy now. And we are having the utmost foreign policy, internal security now. That shows our executive resilience. That shows our executive efficiency. That shows the legendary and visionary leadership of Narendra Modi ji.
Right.
That there has to be a responsible opposition too. If there is a responsible and accountable...
Right. I can see Nikhil over there raising his hand to make a point. If you can quickly make it, because we're running short on time.
That is so pivotal and essential part of the parliament, democracy.
Shivani, I think the problem of the approach of the BJP shows in the approach of the spokesperson. Again, she's back to the point of executive resilience, executive efficiency. They simply don't understand that in a Westminster system, Parliament has a different function. And you say that a lot of the bills were sent to the JPCs back then in the UPA era because of your responsible opposition.
Nikhil,
most
I'm
of them
afraid
were also
we'll
sent
have
because
to
of
wrap up
coalition
this.
compulsion.
Sorry, right. I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up this conversation, but thank you so much for joining us today on ET Now. All of you, thanks again for joining us. Well, up next, an exclusive roundup of the week's key developments from Maharashtra in our Maharashtra 360.
From Gadchiroli's transformation and stronger public infrastructure to new initiatives in healthcare, housing, banking and urban connectivity, here's a look at what's shaping growth in Maharashtra. This is Maharashtra 360. In Gadchiroli, sustained efforts by the police and security forces have helped restore peace and security, creating the foundation for faster development. A transformation driven by CM and Guardian Minister Devendra Fadnavis's vision of turning the district into a new growth frontier. Here's a report.
In Gadchiroli, sustained efforts by the police and security forces have helped restore peace and security, creating the foundation for faster development. Continuous security operations, new security camps, and effective surrender and rehabilitation policies have significantly reduced Maoist influence. With greater security, administration is now able to reach previously inaccessible and remote areas. The restored peace has also cleared the way for infrastructure and economic development. Police initiatives are helping take governance closer to tribal communities. Through the Police Dada Lora Khirki initiative, police stations and assistance centers have become a bridge between the government and people in remote areas. Gadchiroli is emerging as an industrial and employment hub, with major investments creating new opportunities for local communities. With nearly 3 lakh crore rupees in potential steel sector investment, the industrial growth is paving way for enhanced connectivity. The 94-kilometer Bhandara-Gadchiroli road and the 86-kilometer Navegaon-More-Konsari-Surjagarh corridor will strengthen connectivity, including direct mineral transport. Together with access-controlled expressways, these links will connect Gadchiroli with major economic corridors. As the region witnesses security and connectivity improvement, development is reaching deeper into rural and tribal Gadchiroli, strengthening water security, healthcare and education. A new sub-district hospital is coming up in Aheri, while a new hospital is being built in Sironcha Taluka. From a region once marked by isolation and insurgency to a district seeing enhanced governance, infrastructure and industry development and more opportunities for locals, Gadchiroli is writing a new chapter of progress under the leadership of Chief Minister and Guardian Minister Devendra Fadnavis.
After the Punya Shlok Ahilya Devi Holkar Farmers Loan Waiver Scheme, CM Fadnavis directed banks not to make CIBIL scores a condition for sanctioning crop loans. Reaffirming RBI guidelines, the CM said farmers must not face harassment or denial of fresh credit because of their credit history. The state has also maintained that the farm loan waiver will be implemented on priority. Maharashtra is looking to transform Goregaon Film City into a world-class entertainment and technology ecosystem. CM Fadnavis outlined a technology-driven roadmap for its redevelopment while inaugurating Phase 1 of Prime Focus Studios. The vision is to strengthen Mumbai's position as a globally competitive production and creative hub. The new Prime Focus facility adds advanced production infrastructure to Mumbai's film city with large-scale sound stages and integrated production capabilities. Deputy CM Eknath Shinde has given in-principle approval to a proposed metro corridor connecting Thane, Kalwa, Mumra and Diva. The planned line will connect with the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail corridor at Mathardi in Diva and integrate with the wider metro network. It is planned to connect the upcoming high-speed rail station at Mathardi and link with Metro Line 12 at Manpara, creating an integrated network towards Dombivli, Taloja, Kalyan and Bhiwandi. Maha Metro has been tasked with preparing the feasibility study and detailed project report within 6 months. Affordable housing gets a fresh push in Pune as Deputy CM Sunetra Pawar reviewed stalled projects under the Pune Housing and Area Development Board. She directed officials to clear pending administrative hurdles and fast-track housing projects while calling for a large-scale and transparent housing lottery for beneficiaries. And those were all the updates we could pack for you in this edition of Maharashtra 360. Until next week, take care.
Welcome back. You're watching Business at 9 with Shibani and myself, bringing you the latest from India across business and beyond. Now, let's take a look at what's happening on Wall Street. Positive cues are emerging this Thursday evening with all major green indices in the green, of course, with, in fact, Nasdaq leading the gains up over 1%. In fact, softening crude and healthy corporate earnings have added the up move on the indices.
Now, in a more telling signs of inflation cooling off in the United States, U.S. wholesale prices remained unchanged last month, coming in well below expectations of 0.2% rise, while on an annual basis, PPI rose 4.7%, slowing from the 5.5% in June. Core PPI, excluding food and energy, increased 0.2% on the month, also below expectations. Now, let's go over to see what does U.S. Jobless data claims look like.
Well, the data claims that things are a little better than expectations because let's take a look at the numbers here. Initial claims have risen to 209,000 for the week ended August 8th against an estimate of 202,000. However, continuing claims stood at about 1.777 million, below the forecast of 1.794 million. So the data offers a mixed picture of the US labor market and will be closely watched by investors as the Fed weighs in on the strength of the economy and looks for that outlook on interest rates.
Now, let's go over and speak about, the SEBI, who has issued consultation paper for comprehensive review of accredited investor framework. SEBI has, in fact, proposed investment managers to determine and record an investor's accredited status and introduce security markets assets as a new eligibility criteria. Akanksha gets us more details on this.
That's right. SEBI has issued a consultation paper proposing a major review of the accredited investor framework. The market regulator is now looking to make it easier for more financially sophisticated investors to qualify as accredited investors and access products like AIFs, PMS and SIFs. Now, the biggest proposal here is that SEBI wants to consider an investor securities market assets as an additional eligibility criterion. Under the proposal, individuals with at least 5 crore rupees of securities market assets could qualify as accredited investors, and for body corporates, the proposed threshold is 20 crore rupees. Remember, this would be in addition to the existing income and net worth criteria. Now, if we see that why SEBI has come out with this consultation paper and why is it important, so SEBI estimates that this change could expand the potential pool of accredited investors to around 4 lakh investors compared with the existing AIF investor base of around 1 lakh. In fact, the regulator is also proposing a streamlined 3-year validity based on the latest documents. Now, another important proposal is for investors living outside India. SEBI wants to expand the category of deemed accredited investors to cover all PROIs, which is persons resident outside India under FEMA. This would include NRIs, OCIs and other persons residing outside India. The proposal could also make it easier for these investors to access AIFs without the minimum investment threshold. Now, remember, the consultation paper is open for public comments until 3rd September. So overall, the key takeaway is that SEBI wants to widen the accredited investor universe and make it easier for investors with substantial market assets to access sophisticated investment products.
Moving on, a day after Tata Sons chairman N. Chandrasekaran announced his unwillingness to seek reappointment for his third term, the Sir Dorabji Tata Trust, which holds around 27.9% holdings in Tata Sons, has accepted the resignation of Chandrasekaran and has initiated the process to search for his successor. In fact, let's listen in to the very first reaction of N. Chandrasekaran, who is now the ex-chairperson of Tata itself.
I have nothing to say. Thank you. Thank you.
About your success, Now let's go over to my colleague Anurag Joshi, who filed a report earlier in the day.
The trustees of Sir Dorabji Tata Trust, who met today, passed a resolution to initiate the setting up of a selection panel as soon as possible to recommend the successor to N. Chandrasekaran, who announced his decision yesterday not to seek reappointment when his term comes to an end in February 2027. The panel is being set up in accordance with the Articles of Association of Tata Sons, in terms of the succession planning right now, the field is wide open, but it's still early days. Whether the Tatas seek an internal candidate or they look externally to find the successor. Internally, right now, in terms of the talent, there are CEOs of the bigger Tata companies, and that includes TV Narendran, who heads Tata Steel, and Praveer Sinha, who is the CEO of Tata Power, and also Saurabh Agarwal, who is the CFO of Tata Sons. But these names are still up in the air since it's still premature, and the panel will have to finally take the decision on the matter. The only Sir Dorabji Tata Trust met today, whereas the other key trust, the Sir Ratan Tata Trust, could not meet due to restrictions imposed on it by the Charity Commissioner from holding any meetings or taking any key decisions.
Right, shifting focus to trade next, let's take a look at some of the latest trade data. Merchandise exports in the month of July rose about 19.5% year-on-year to about $44.24 billion. The total merchandise exports so far have in fact reached a figure of $129.45 billion. My colleague Sumita brings us the complete picture.
That's right. The picture for trade data, both if we talk about the April to July, the first quarter of 2026, or the July month, has been rather robust. So let's first talk about Q1, that is April to July 2026. Well, exports, a growth of $236.28 billion was clocked. So basically, which means that exports were up over 13% on a YOY basis. Total merchandise exports reached $129.45 billion, and they were up 13% on a YOY basis. When we talk about the July picture, well, merchandise exports were up nearly 20%, 19.63% to be precise on a YOY basis. But overall exports, when we talk about that picture, which combines merchandise and services exports, they were up by over 13% on a YOY basis. But when we talk about exports going up, merchandise imports were also up at $76.22 billion, which is essentially a 17% rise when we talk about it on a YOY basis, and which is why the trade deficit also rose quite a bit. When we talk about high growth categories, well, electronics goods, engineering goods, gems and jewelry, and of course dairy remained some of the key top export categories, top export commodities. When we talk about the key export geographies, well, US has consistently been the top geography where India's exports have reached. So of course, $34.4 billion worth of exports in April to July versus $33.48 billion in April to July 2025. Again, UAE did well in terms of exports growth, Singapore as well. When talking about the West Asia picture, particularly for the month of July, well, exports were up over 8% on a YOY basis, and this is particularly important because the trade deficit with West Asia was at 56% for the month of March 2026 on a YOY basis, and now the situation is improving because new ports have started becoming operational and there is more cargo that's flowing through them, is what the Commerce Secretary said in a briefing. So, of course, that's the whole picture as far as India's trade picture is concerned, both for Q1 and for the month of July.
Right now, while responding to Russia's sanctions bill in the US, government sources have in fact said that India is engaged with US at various levels and conversations with US have been reassuring. Sumita again gets us more details on this. Over to you, Sumita.
That's right. A government source has told ET now that India still remains engaged with the United States at various levels as far as the trade agreement and trade talks are concerned. And India is closely following the developments on the back of the Russia sanctions bill. Remember, the sanctions bill was approved by Senate a couple of days back. And in fact, government sources believe that this proposed sanctioning a Russia bill is essentially part of the legislative process of the US Congress. It's an internal matter of the United States, but India is watching all all of those developments. In fact, the source reiterated that all our engagements that have happened with the United States have reiterated their commitment to work towards an agreement that is balanced, that is mutually beneficial. And in fact, there's also an intent to work towards an agreement which is in line with the joint statement of February 2026, and which is when an interim agreement was agreed upon between both the sides. In fact, we are also given to understand that conversations between India and the United States have been reassuring. That is the stance that the Indian government feels. And of course, as far as Section 301 tariffs at 10% are concerned, government believes that that is applicable to 55% of exports to the US. However, 45% of exports to the US, they remain outside of the ambit of Section 301 investigation outcome. And of course, a key outcome of the trade deal, whenever that happens, is going to bring predictability. So of course, India is looking at getting predictability for businesses as a part of that deal via the US-India trade deal.
Welcome back. You're watching India Tonight. I'm Shubhani Garat, and joining us from our Chennai studio is my colleague Jude Sanit. Now, Jude, chocolate is getting a little harder to love. That's the report that our colleague Akanksha has filed. Now, at least for your wallet, the chocolate is getting hard to love because India's confectionery market grew to a $4.3 billion in FY26. But the price of that indulgence is in fact changing fast. Premium chocolates are getting more expensive while the mass market packs are getting smaller. My colleague Akanksha is joining in to break down the BISOM data and explain us why chocolates are getting more expensive.
That's right. Chocolate lovers could be paying more for their favorite chocolates as premium chocolate prices continue to rise while mass market packs are getting smaller. According to what we have learned from BISOM is that India's confectionery market has grown to around $4.3 billion in FY26 from $4.1 billion in FY25. Now, what's interesting is that the premium segment accounts for around 20 to 22% of India's chocolate confectionery market. In fact, premium chocolates grew 9.5% in FY26, while dark chocolates have risen by 8%. And both these categories alone have grown faster than the overall category. Now, when it comes to prices, premium chocolates priced above 50 rupees have seen direct MRP price hikes of around 25 to 37% over the past 3 years. In fact, in the last year alone, premium chocolate prices have gone up by around 8 to 10%. And it's just not about price hikes, but premium packs have also seen grammage cuts of around 5 to 11% over the past 3 years. Now, at the mass market end, the story is quite different. Products priced between 5 rupees and 20 rupees have largely avoided direct MRP hikes over the past 3 years. Instead, companies have reduced the grammage of these packs by around 11.5 to 20%. Now, one of the key reasons behind this price pressure is the rising input cost. Global sugar prices have risen by 5.6% in July, according to the FAO, and higher cocoa prices could add further pressure on confectionery makers. In fact, according to BISOM, a possible government halt on the sugarcane exports could further impact margins for sugar-heavy candy makers ahead of this festive season. Now, meanwhile, BISOM also expects that confectionery market demand is expected to grow around 9 to 11% between August and December, with November likely to see the peak growth at around 13%. So, this festive season, chocolate demand could remain strong, but consumers may have to pay more for their premium chocolates.
Well, chocolate's getting pricier, then luckily I'm not that big a fan. But moving on to some court action next. In fact, let's take a look at some strong observations coming in from the Supreme Court. The Apex Court questioned the FSSAI for its reluctance to introduce front-of-the-pack warning labels on packaged foods that were high in sugar, salt and saturated fat. In fact, the Supreme Court asked the food regulator if it was bowing to corporate pressure. In fact, the bench has also given FSSAI 2 weeks to place its final decision on record. The court, in fact, emphasized that the move is in complete public interest, particularly for the health of growing children. My colleague Harish is here for more.
This was clearly a case where the Supreme Court has come out and battled for the consumer rights. The Supreme Court today pulled up the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, the FSSAI, for its reluctance to put warning labels on packets and bottles with carrying food with high salt, sugar and saturated fats, and questioned whether they have indeed come under the pressure of the corporates in this regard. The bench led by Justice J.B. Pardiwala even went on to ask how many people in India can afford rich dry fruits, how many students are having snacks like kurkure. We are not against any particular food product, but we are repeatedly saying that you should at least inform, you should take measures to inform people as to what they are consuming, what is the level of saturated fats, what is the level of salt, what is the level of sugar. The Supreme Court was hearing a matter wherein in the last hearing, the Supreme Court had asked FSSAI to put such warning labels on food products. But today the Supreme Court pulled up the FSSAI, noting that in its minutes in which the Supreme Court order was discussed, there was reluctance on the part of various.
Right, now moving on, more details have emerged in the investigation into the Air India Phuket Delhi AI 2379 incident, which saw aircraft suddenly lose around 300 feet of altitude during the flight. Now, according to the report, the aircraft recorded high hydraulic system warnings and autopilot disconnect, with investigators now examining whether these technical alerts played a role in the sudden altitude drop. The incident left 17 passengers and crew members injured, and AAIB is examining the aircraft's flight data and other evidence as a part of the ongoing probe. My colleague Shefali is joining us now with more details on this.
In a new development in Air India Phuket Delhi incident, now conversation between pilots and Delhi ATC is emerging, where pilots made a pan-pan call 15 to 18 minutes prior to landing at Delhi airport. But the question that remains is that why pilots decided not to reach out to Kolkata ATC when the incident happened at Odisha airspace. When the incident happened at Odisha airspace, that is when the flight plunged 300 feet. But the question is why the decision was taken by the pilot to not reach out to Kolkata ATC and land at the nearest airport. The sources telling ET now that the pilots told Delhi ATC that few passengers are injured, and the reason that was given was of turbulence. While the severity of the incident was not told by the pilots to the Delhi ATC. Sources are also saying that they should have landed at some nearest airport and should have contacted Kolkata ATC. In a separate news, today Air India has announced a launch of full screening test of all pilots of the Air India group. Both Air India pilot and Air India Express pilot will now go through a full screening test, and this is happening after the pilot in command was tested positive in the second confirmatory test for marijuana. From today, that is 13th of August, Air India will start the full screening of the pilot. The communication was sent by Manish Uppal, who is the head of flight safety operations of Air India, and told all the pilots that it is necessary that the passenger trust the airline, and to maintain that it is necessary for the airline to conduct these screenings.
And with that, it's a wrap on India Tonight. But don't go anywhere, because Shibani and myself will be back for Business at 9 in just a few moments from now. So keep watching ET Now for more. But for the team and myself, it's goodbye, but only just for the moment.